Thank you so much, folks. Now, on that note, we are headed towards our next workshop of the evening, the third workshop. Now, we're going to be talking about how you can build an impressive resume. Now, this is truly one of the most crucial aspects of your, overseas education journey. It's one of the first things the university sees when you apply, for this college, for this program. Now, we'll be starting off with the session in a jiffy. Just quickly juggling into my presentation. All right, and as I do that, I am going to introduce you to the panelists of today's workshop, right? So, all right, we have Michael and Peter here. Very good evening, Michael. Very good evening, Peter. And once again, very good evening to all our participants who've joined us this evening. Hi. Awesome. All right, so before we begin with the session, I'm just going to quickly introduce Peter, Michael, and of course, Temple University to you. Now, so Temple University is home to 37,000 students from across the world, and Temple University offers benefits of a large university with 150 plus undergraduate majors across 17 schools and colleges with small school appeal, which is so important. And this makes the community feel like a family. Now, this university is located in Philadelphia, which is an industry-rich city, and it provides students with an edge for internships and jobs, right? So both our panelists today are from Temple University. A little bit about Peter Liu, who is the Director of International Admissions, serving as Temple University's International Admissions Director, originally from Copenhagen, Denmark. Peter has lived in 4 countries, visited over 70 nations, and has over 15 years of experience in higher education, hosted hundreds of information and guidance sessions around the globe. He is passionate about internationalization and helping students realize their education dreams. Welcome, Peter. And with us, we also have Michael Ucino, Assistant Dean of Admissions, Enrollment Management, and Student Recruitment. Michael serves as the Assistant Dean of Admissions Enrollment Management at Temple University's College of Public Health. In this role, he oversees recruitment and admission of talented future professionals, clinicians, and researchers to over 20 disciplines and over 50 academic programs in the college. Michael has nearly 15 years of experience in higher education, marketing, recruitment, and admissions. Welcome to the workshop, Michael. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome. So just wanted to quickly check in. Peter, Michael, would you like to share the presentation, or shall I go ahead?
I think if you go ahead, that's fine. If you want to be playing along with it.
Absolutely, I'm on for that. All right, so let's get started. Over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Malvika, and thank you very much to iSchool Connect for having us here today. I'm hoping that for Michael and I, with all of this experience that we have, that we are going to sound somewhat professional, hopefully, and that you get something out of it. We have put a little outline on today just to give you an idea of where it is that we're going to be going. Malvika kindly made a little quick introduction to Temple University already. I'm going to put a couple of figures on it, and then we're going to talk about the main topic for today. We're going to differentiate between the CVs and the resumes. We're going to talk about where resume is used. We're going to talk about why universities use resume. And then we're going to break it down into some key components of the resumes, and we're going to show some tips from our areas and some do's and don'ts. We have a couple of samples to show, and then we hope to have ample of time for some communication. We do have a couple of questions along the presentation, so please When we post those, please feel free to interact in the chat box the responses that you think are appropriate to those prompts. All right, if we do the next slide, we can start with just maybe 60 more seconds about Temple University. As Malvika said, it is a university that is located in Philadelphia, which is on the East Coast of the United States, right between Washington, D.C. and New York. It is the second largest city on the East Coast, and it was the founding city in the United States. One other thing that is really, really cool was that it was founded as a community, sort of like not a community college, but a college that was located in the community to reach a little bit further, to make education available to the ordinary population, which is very different. And then it's grown into what it is that you're seeing today. We are indeed a top 50 US News World Report research, public research institution. As Malvika said, we have nearly 40,000 students, of which 3,000 are international students from over 130 countries. And even though Temple is a very large university, it does have a very small feel because of the way that it has been set up and the way it's been built. The campus style is very closely connected, but also in terms of the learning. We have great similarities to some of the nicest fields of small private liberal arts colleges. Our student to faculty ratio is 13:1, and our average class sizes are about 29, which is outstanding for a large university. We use holistic approach in our admission, which is why the session today is actually relative in terms of what we do. So if you have not done anything with resume before, this is definitely your chance to brush up on that and use that as part of your admission process. We do have a dedicated international admission and student service at Temple University. That is also something that is extraordinary for a large university. And we have something that we call Fly in 4, which is referring to our mascot, which is an owl. It is essentially a promise that you can finish your degree in 4 years. And if it takes longer than that, we pay the remaining time. However, 93% of our students, they sign up for this process and they do complete the 4-year bachelor's degree. If you're one of those students who are thinking about studying another place around the world where maybe the bachelor's degree is 3 years, we also do have programs that are dedicated to get a master's degree in 5 years. They kind of work like a 3+2, and you get both the bachelor's degree and the master's degree. Talk a little bit about all the stuff there is to do at Temple. We have nearly 350 clubs and activities, including Division I sports. Fairly certain that if there's an activity or a club that you're interested in joining, you will find it at Temple. And if it doesn't exist there, you will get help to actually start it. And the other reason why we're here today, right, is at the end of your education, or for those of you who might be nearing your education, you want to get a job, right? So like Malvika said, we're located in Philadelphia. It is one of the top places for research recruitment, for businesses. Temple has more than 350,000 alums worldwide. So that is a really, really great network to pick up on. All right, I think I have said enough about this. Let's get started with the difference between what is a CV and a resume. So in general, CVs and resumes are pretty much the same. Actually, when I grew up, I used the term curricular vitae, as you may also know it as. And I think maybe because of my European background, that was the definition that we used more. However, the professional definition seems to be that the resume is a slightly shorter version. It's more of a 1 page, maybe maximum 2 pages, more of a sort of like a bullet points of your achievements and accomplishments, whereas the curricular vitae is a longer version. There's also a professional interpretation that the curricular vitae, at least in its original format, also included the cover letter, for example, when you were applying for a job. So now that we have defined the differences between the CV and the resume, we're going to go into details and talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Peter. So now that we, again, as Peter said, we have this understanding of the curriculum vitae versus the resume. Here in the US, these tend to be largely used interchangeably. So you may see when you apply for really all types of things here in the United States, the use of CV or resume, but really they're just looking for a document that outlines professional background, experiences, and the things that might lead anybody who's reading that resume or CV to assess capabilities, assess abilities, assess skills. So when we ask, where do you expect to use a CV? Where do you expect to use a resume? In general, at least at this point in your life, we would generally see that you're using a CV or a resume to apply for internships or potentially employment opportunities. While you're in high school or while you're pursuing your undergraduate degree. Certainly they're used in universities admissions. So whether you're applying for undergraduate programs or master's programs, doctoral programs, a CV resume is generally required as part of the application process. And then certainly beyond graduation, as you're applying for full-time employment opportunities, obviously that tends to be where we think most about resumes and CVs is for applying for those full-time, maybe corporate types of jobs. So in all, in kind of summary of this slide, the CV resume is an extraordinarily important document. Very often, it's especially as you're applying for maybe universities or other types of positions, it can seem as maybe less important than maybe a transcript, less important than maybe that essay. But certainly for a university like Temple, for instance, where we use a holistic approach to admissions, the CV resume becomes a very important document for us to get a sense of what kind of background you have, and more importantly, what kind of experiences are you going to be able to bring into the classroom, into the advising offices, into the student clubs and organizations that we have in the community, in the campus community. So again, this is a very important document, particularly for universities as we assess how you'll fit within the university's culture.
That's great. If we can have the next slide, Malvika. So I'm going to prompt this question out to the audience here. Why would university want to see a resume? If you want to type maybe a couple of suggestions in the chat box, we'll see if we can get a little interactive here.
Folks, so we really want to know, what do you think our university is looking for? Is it academics, or is it something else that they want to see in your resume? What all should you probably add to show it off to your universities?
All right, I see some responses here already. This thing is moving faster than I can keep up with. I know personality of candidates. What you have done, this simple way to understand the candidate. Absolutely, you guys are spot on. Thank you very much for chiming in here. As Michael just mentioned, resume is very much part of the application package. You might not see us putting them as a required field. For example, on the Temple requirements, we do not have resume listed there, but however, I always encourage my students to submit resumes. Why? Well, it really just helps me getting to know you better. It helps me get a quick overview of the most basic points about what you have done. It helps me provide context in your life path, right? And this is important. This helps me understand gaps. It helps me understand wherever you have gone to school, what type of curriculum that you have in there. And those things, of course, are important for the decision. I know a lot of those answers could be put on the Common App, but the resume really brings that clear view into place so that when we go through the application, we have that context to build on. There are some programs, including something that Michael will talk about, for example, at colleges and specific program where the resume is required. Michael, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So based on my role, as you heard in my introduction, I serve as the Assistant Dean of Admissions for our College of Public Health at Temple, which means the students I work with currently are largely interested in health, healthcare, medical types of fields. But this is not the only role I've had at Temple. Prior to this, I was the director of graduate enrollment for our Fox School of Business. And I bring this up simply to say that the resumes I was looking at when I directed admissions for the business school, I was looking for very different things than I would be as I am now when I look at resumes for the College of Public Health. So I bring this up simply to say that resumes and should be very much catered to kind of telling a story about how you not only fit into the university or to the college, but also to that field. So for example, when I was in the business school, if I saw a student who was applying for an undergraduate or graduate program in, say, finance, I'm going to be making sure that they have at least a basic understanding of kind of the corporate level professionalism that a lot of the firms and companies that I'm sure they want to work at eventually are going to expect. So a certain level of kind of formal professionalism with regards to, say, the Wall Street world, high finance world, would be something that I'm looking for in the resume in addition to the content itself. Meanwhile, in the College of Public Health, looking at the fact that I'm looking for students who are very passionate about health, wellness, community. These are all types of things that you should infuse the resume as well. So that should really be highlighted, because again, it's telling me not only how you'll fit in at Temple, but how you're going to fit into these fields. So making sure that the resume is very much catered, customized to the discipline or to the field to which you're applying is very critical, especially from an admissions perspective.
On the next slide, Michael is going to start off with some of the components that we want to see on the resume.
Absolutely. So let's start with, we have some icons that we're going to show to kind of highlight some of the biggest areas that we want to see in a resume. And I'll take this first one with personal details. Obviously you're submitting an application to university, which means that, yes, we're going to have your name and your address and your phone number and email address and all those things on the application. But as Peter mentioned, one of the biggest reasons we like resumes is that it can give us a sense of everything all on a single piece of paper, as opposed to us having to flip back and forth between multiple areas. The personal details of a resume allowed us to kind of just start right up front. Your name, where you're from, where you live, and how we can contact you. So those personal details become extremely important in terms of the functionality of a resume, a one-stop shop, so to speak, for us to find your name and contact information. As we move on from there, then we look at kind of your educational background. When you're applying either for undergraduate study or for graduate study, right after, especially for a university, one of the first things we want to know is where have you done your schooling. So if you're applying for undergraduate, we want to get a sense of what high school you've been at. Putting GPA information along with where you went to high school is also very helpful to admissions officers as well. Also, under education, listing any kind of special curricula, special types of academic programs that you've been involved with, whether that's international baccalaureate coursework, whether that's university level coursework that's been tied into your secondary education coursework. Any kind of important aspects of your educational background will be really important there. The next area is work experience. And when we think about resume, this tends to be what we think the resume is all about. And that's certainly true, especially as you're applying for employment opportunities. But with regards to a university, we also like to see work experience. If for no other reason, then it gives us a chance to kind of predict it gives us a chance to do two things. One, it gives us a sense of your work ethic, right? We find it, especially at Temple University, where we are a public institution that largely serves many first-generation students, first-time students that are going to college, many students that have to work in order to support their education. What we tend to find is that listing that work experience gives us a sense of your tenacity, your commitment to wanting to work hard for what it is you want to pursue. But it also gives us a sense of kind of the experiences that you're going to be able to talk about in a classroom. So, I'll go back to, for instance, talking about reviewing applications for a business school. If you've worked in any kind of business, if you've started your own business, if you have interned in a large corporate environment, these are not just things that are just impressive on their own, but they also give me a sense of, wow, this student's going to have some really interesting things to talk about in the classroom when certain topics are being brought up, because you have that real world experience, you've lived it, you've breathed it, it's not theoretical to you. So this work experience component, especially as you write it relative to the degree program that you're applying for, is very important as well. We also will want to look at skills, and skills is a little bit separate from any of the other aspects that we have here, because what we generally will find with skills are things that could be really immediately useful to an organization, company, or even a university. So skills could include whether you're bilingual or multilingual, for instance. Skills could also include more technical areas like certain computer software that you might be familiar with. What I will say, though, is that skills should be very much attached to kind of the time that you live in. And I know that's a very weird sentence for me to say, but the number of resumes I see in 2020, 2021 that still list, Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint or even typing, these are all things that I would expect anybody applying to university to have, and I'm not sure I would call them skills. Unless you've been certified by Microsoft, which is a possibility, that is a path that somebody can take, certified by Microsoft in these kinds of platforms, it's not really something that you need to put on the resume. So when you're thinking about these skills, think about skills that are actually unique, that not necessarily everybody in the general population or the majority of the population of people your age might have. But that skills section gives us a sense of some extra things that you've done, an extra mile that you've gone that's going to enhance your ability to contribute to an organization or to a community. And Peter's going to take these bottom four.
Well, thanks, Michael. And I think this is for my population, which tends to be younger, right? You guys are either in 11th grade or 12th grade when you start communicating with someone like myself or my office. So work experience might not be one of the ones you have the most of. However, I do see students who have started their own company, like Michael said, which is just phenomenal to reach about the ingenuity and innovative youth out there. And that's what really gets someone like Michael and I excited about admitting students. So the bottom four, I would say maybe a little bit more softer areas. So we got recognition and awards, right? This is part of actually telling what you have done and what you have achieved. And many of you have achieved many good things already by the time you're in 11th grade or in 12th grade. Activities, this is very important. We want to know that you do other things than just sitting and doing math all day long. So the extracurricular activities is something that you're doing while you are at school besides studying. Now, this is really a keen difference between the United States maybe and many other countries, where many other countries may not have extracurricular activities at the school. It's something that you do after school. So thankfully, we also have a term that is called co-curricular, which you could use for that. And that is really what you do outside school. So I know in my sense, when I grew up outside school, I was participating in sports and literally, doing that kind of things outside school. We talked a little bit about why do we want to use these? Well, they really help defining who you are as a person. It helps define character. It helps define your ability, your strengths, maybe even your weaknesses, right? Places that you need to do a little bit more work to be better on. It shows transformation. It shows adaptability. It shows maturity and many, many other things. I talked just briefly about cover letter. We're not going to spend much time on here, but like I said, if you are submitting a cover letter for something as well, which of course could be the essay, make sure that cover letter is specific to the relevant story that you want to tell, that it is not just a recreation in longer words about your resume. All right, if we can have the next one, Melvika, then Michael
Peter,
will start on that.
Yeah, I think we have a good question here actually about how much work experience will be necessary to get into a highly ranked university. Since I touched on work experience as a part of the resume, I think this is an appropriate question.
Yes.
To my knowledge, I don't know of any American undergraduate institution ranked or not, that's going to require work experience as a component of admissions. At the same time, if you're thinking about graduate education, so master's or even certain doctoral programs, there may be work experience required. So at the undergraduate level, it's not so much that we're requiring work experience, but as I said, it can give us an indication of certain areas of skill. So, if you are juggling both school and a job, it's telling us that you likely have good time management skills. It's telling us that you likely are very organized. It's telling us that you're very dedicated, that you're tenacious. So these are all things that any university would love to see in its students. So it's not so much that work experience is required, so much that a student that has some nice work experience in addition to being a student tells us about certain soft skills and certain characteristics that you may have as a person. Peter,
I may want to add anything. Yeah, I might want to add, Michael, that some of you guys might be interested in MBA programs, for example, and many universities are going to have two different streams of MBA. One is going to be sort of like a professional MBA, and they usually require 3 to 5 years of work experience. The other stream is going to be like an academic MBA, where you can simply take the GMAT and come straight from your bachelor's degree, for example. We have a couple of extra questions I'm going to take, just like you did, Michael. I haven't participated in sports. Is that a problem? Or is sports very important? No, that's not really what it is. The idea that we put the extracurricular on there is to show that you do other things. It's literally about your activities, your engagement, your holistic person, if you want to call it that way. It doesn't have to be sports, right? It could be that you're volunteering in a food drive or Humanity for Habitat or relief of any kind, or tutoring, or poet club, or something like that. The whole idea is that you do something other than singular mind, because that shows your ability. All right, I think for the purpose of time, we will go on with this one, but we will continue to answer questions as well along the way.
So how do we set our resume apart? So we've got 8 terms here that we feel are really the best descriptors for if we read a fantastic resume, we would usually use these 8 terms to kind of describe that resume. So I'll start with the first 4 to give you a sense of why we might use this word to describe a good resume that passes across our desk. The first one is crisp, and this is kind of a unique word to use in describing a resume, but when we use crisp, we really do mean kind of sharp. It's direct. It is very clear what you're trying to say. Not a lot of fluff associated with the wording in your resume. We like to see a crisp resume would have a lot of action-oriented words like achieved or demonstrated or implemented or directed. Or managed, so a lot of those types of action words that give us a sense of you in motion from a student or work perspective. We'd also want to see a cohesive resume, and that is, even visually, just that everything looks very organized, it looks very templated, it looks consistent as one cohesive document. So that's also a very important part of a resume. We also want to make sure it's complete. When you're applying out of secondary school, or if you're applying out of undergrad into graduate programs, we want to make sure that everything is there. That is really important to us. If we see big gaps in your resume, so we see work experience that's from 1 year to the next, and then we see a 2-year gap before we see anything else, we're going to wonder if that's complete. We want to get a sense that every bit of your experience is there as we take a look at these resumes. We also obviously want to make sure that the resume is honest. And it's not, when we say honest, obviously it should go without saying that we want to avoid any outright disinformation or outright incorrect information. But we also want to make sure, when we say honest, we also want to make sure that you are being very, you have a lot of sense of describing your experiences in an accurate way. One of the worst things that a student can do, or a professional applying for jobs can do, is kind of inflate what their role was when, or what their experience was. And I say this not just because, you know, ethically it's not a good thing, but you're going to have to assume that at some point you'll sit down with us for an interview, an advising appointment, and we might ask you about these things. And it's going to be a very awkward position for you, again, if you've inflated this experience and it's not really true. It's not really there. So being honest is also a very important part of the resume. And Peter will take these next 4.
Well, thanks, Michael. I think these 8 right here in this slide are really awesome. We sort of already covered unique, right? You are unique as a person. Everyone in this room and around you are going to be unique. So don't copy somebody else's content. Stand out and make it yours. We're going to show some examples here today, but we're going to also make sure that the examples that we show you, don't copy them. Just use them as a guide in terms of steps, but make your own. The tone. For international students in my past, I really have not seen much problems with the tone. International students tend to be very professional and very formal. So I think that's probably because of your upbringing and the nature and the countries that you're coming. So I think the tone tends to be pretty good. The only thing that I might add to that in terms of tone is to make sure that it is balanced. Also, if you get some familiarity with who you are communicating with on your resume, you can maybe make it a little bit lighter and less formal. Dynamic. By dynamic, we do not mean constant change, right? Except for frequent update, if you want to put it that way. But what we do mean is that we want your resume to be full of ideas and energy. Tailor-made, this is really probably where you can make it the most unique, right? This is like an awesome suit or a dress. It uniquely brings out the special part of you and what you're able to do. So you can tailor-make that resume for a specific task, right? So if you're applying for a job that requires IT skills, for example, you're going to want to highlight IT skills on your resume in terms of your experience, etc. So make sure to think about that. Make sure to use what you know. I don't know about you, Michael, and the rest of you in the audience, but these slides really makes me feel hungry. All right, Malvika, can we have the next one?
It's almost dinner time here, Peter, and I'm already wanting to order something, probably at least one thing off this list.
I bet it's dynamic.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the do's and the don'ts. This slide that you see on the screen right now looks pretty nice and colorful, right? So we have broken it down and we have designated me as the clown here. So I'm going to show you what not to do, and then Michael's going to take it back in and actually show you what to do. While I think the colors are wonderful on this thing, and you're going to hear me later on, I'm going to say I really do like infographic, but I'm not sure I understand all of the infographic on this slide. It's also sloppy, right? It's irregular. There's poor style. It is certainly incomplete in many, many ways. And as you can see, there are spelling mistakes. It's sort of like all over the place. So this is really a good example of how you do not want to make your resume. Having said that, if we go to the next slide, Michael is going to tell you a little bit more about how ideally the resume should look or form.
So this is an example, again, of a good student resume, and for a couple of reasons here. First, we'll start with that My Objectives section. This resume very clearly talks about who this is supposed to be for, who it's supposed to be read by, and why they're submitting it. The only thing I'll say about objectives in a resume is that it really should be catered to the specific institution that you're applying for, the specific company that you're applying for. I think too often I see resumes that you use the same exact resume for everywhere you're applying. So it's a very vague objective, you know, to achieve my undergraduate degree in marketing, let's say. But if you're submitting this application to Temple, this resume to Temple, for instance, our business school, it should very clearly mention that you are looking for entry into the Temple University Business School. So this is a matter of kind of, you know, copy, paste, swap out for every institution that you might be applying for. But it tells us that you were very intentional with this document with regards to this institution. The key strengths area is a good one as well. Key strengths, at least for somebody in my position, especially if this led to an admissions interview, starts getting me thinking about what kinds of questions I want to ask you about. The self-awareness of what your strengths are. You have a good handle on who you are and what you can do. I think that's a really bold but yet still very professional way to kind of position yourself for what you might be able to provide our campus community. Obviously, if in terms of reaching you, this is something that we see increasingly as well, is using your social media handles on your resume so that we can take a look at them. I hope this would go without saying, but if you're going to include your social media handles, you want to make sure that your actual social media content is professional, it's appropriate, because I will say that if you put it on there, we can and will look at it. So something to keep in mind as you kind of get a sense of how we can still contact you and find out more about you. I will say that LinkedIn is probably my favorite thing to view. Even if you do include your Facebook or Instagram, I don't know that it's something I want to dive right into because, again, it's supposed to be a fun social platform. But if you put it on there, I'll take a look at it. But I do like LinkedIn because it is basically an extension of your resume, but on a web-based form where you can be a lot more detailed and provide links to other things on your LinkedIn. Talk about only relevant experience. This is a resume that I think does a nice job of doing that. Rufus here is a marketing student. So talking about being a social media manager, talking about being a marketing intern, these are really relevant for a marketing student. I will say though that if you are not sure what kind of major you're looking for, what is relevant experience, we'll put everything there because you're obviously giving us a sense of all the different dynamic things that you've accomplished, that you've experienced. So when we say relevant is a relative term, relevant to what you're applying for and what your objectives are. So that's something to keep in mind. And as far as, design, make sure it's print friendly. Even though that you're submitting these documents largely electronically, I will say that as we share them potentially with faculty, as we share them with other colleagues, very often we still get asked to print these things out. If it's not easily printable, it doesn't translate to a print format, that can be problematic, especially as we try to share it. And then finally, speaking about your most recent academic achievements, I think this is important as well. I think the key word here is recent. Certainly, if you're applying for an undergraduate program or even a graduate program and you're mentioning awards or achievements that you earned in primary school, these are not necessarily relevant to us as we think about your abilities for an undergraduate or graduate program. So while you still may be very proud of some of these achievements, just make sure they're mostly recent so that we can get a sense of how that achievement is going to inform your performance in the university at that time.
All right, on the next one, we're gonna cover some samples. And this, I just wanna say, this is much better. Not compared to Michael's, but compared to mine, right? So I would actually confess that this looks a lot like my first resume from 1992. So having said that, maybe you need to be a little bit more modern. I will also confess that this does not look pretty, and that's not why I like it. But it's because it is really easy to find everything that I need to find when I'm looking for candidates. I have probably hired about 50 students or associates in my career, and I will guess seen at least probably 300 or 400 resumes and cover letters. So this makes it really, really easy to find out what it is that I need to know. It is not super dynamic, right? But or unique for that matter, but it is professional, it is crisp, it is complete, it is honest, and it is tailor-made for the purpose of what I need, not necessarily what you need. Michael's going to show the more modern version for you now that is a little bit maybe nicer, but it might take a little bit more time for someone like he and I to look at.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So this is basically another version of the resume I just talked about in terms of the way that it's organized. It uses slightly different, terms. This one doesn't have a direct objective listed, but in place of strengths, it's using core competencies. One, very personal choice you have to make is including a photo. This is really about your comfort level. I will say, at least in the roles that I've had, I've never read a resume and said, well, I really wonder what this person looks like. That's not really a question I would ask myself after seeing a resume. But, adding a photo can add a level of personalization. Now I have a face with a name. So it can help, but not including what I wouldn't say hurts. So that's very much a personal decision you have to make. If you do decide you want to use a photo, the only thing I would suggest is making sure that it is a professional photo, high resolution, a professional, non distracting background. It shouldn't be a photo of you and your friends that you've had to crop yourself out. So it should be a photo taken specifically for the purpose of the resume. But this is, again, another, I think, nice version of the resume. Like the resume that just preceded it, this actually has the same functionality from what we would call a scannability perspective. I can very quickly scan this and get a sense of your background and how to contact you and your academic history very quickly. So again, this is another solid version of the resume.
All right, that's great. For the next one, this is, we talked about putting this in here. We thought that it was 3 different categories, right? That straight, sort of a little bit boring, and then the more professional, nice one that Michael just talked about. And then we just wanted to put a creative example on here as well. We both talked about that this is maybe a little bit daring and should maybe only be used in specific areas. And Michael is going to talk a little bit more about that. But what I wanted to point out, and the reason I want to point it out, is because I really do like the infographics that I said. I also like these creative resume. And to this day, one of my student workers, maybe about 10 years back, submitted a resume to me, which was about 2 pages, I think it was. And he used a lot of very dynamic infographics. And this is back 10 years ago, right? Before these signs were really, really modern, at the time. And it still stands out to this day today. And I have even in my own mind tried to thought, well, how can I make my own resume that dynamic? And I haven't found a way yet. So if you're applying for something really specific, this might be good. What I thought this would be useful for, maybe this is a really good sort of a 1-page resume if you're going to a place where there might be potential of meeting somebody that you could see as a future boss. That might be a really nice 1-page handout or something like that if you are managing to print it in a nice format. Michael, you want to say anything extra about this?
Yeah, so I would also say, in addition to, I think what Peter is absolutely right, this is a good leave behind piece is generally what I call that. After a meeting or I'm at a conference or something, just leave it instead of a business card. But using it as a resume, I would say that you want to be, it is certainly bold, it's certainly unique, it would definitely be different from the rest of the pile, but you've got to ask yourself whether that's the right call for where you're applying. I will say at a university level, you're not applying for employment. We're not necessarily going to say, oh, this is too creative or this is too outside the box. But I would say that for employment, for employment opportunities, you really want to think about that company and that company's culture. And you also want to think about your field as well. So for example, if we're working we're working for a large corporate bank and it's a financial analyst position, I don't know that this is maybe the best resume to submit for something like that. But if you're applying for a graphic design advertising position with a creative firm, this is absolutely something I would expect, right? The one thing I'll say too is Peter and I talked about, well, should we provide a template of a highly creative sample format? And we ultimately ended on no, because if you're copying somebody else's creative format, that kind of doesn't give us a sense that you're creative, right? So the creative format should really, if you are into design and photography and illustration, it should be something that you actually design yourself. What we want to put out there is that you should feel that freedom based on your field, your discipline, and certainly any company organization that you're applying for.
couldn't have said it better myself, Michael, for sure. We have one more slide left and promised, then we get to the open session. This actually, we prompted it as a question, but really just to give you an idea. Really, really simple answer here. If you have no resume right now, you could go to your Google Docs or you can go to your MS Word. It has template. They are really easy to kind of work out and start from. Excuse me. But there are also numerous online sources you can imagine. You simply just type into Google and you're going to find some of them. Some of them could be canva.com, Nova Resume, myperfectresume.com, resumenerd.com, and city.com. They have a blog about resume tips. Those are just a few of them. There is one note I will say about the ones that you find when you do a Google search is beware that sometimes those are commercial. So maybe you can build your resume, but to actually have a version of it, you either have to put in an email, which they're going to send you a bunch of stuff, or you're going to have to pay for it at the end of the design. So something to keep in mind of that. But I think they're good to learn how to build your resume. Okay. Michael, do you want to add anything to that, or you're good?
No, if I'll add anything, LinkedIn also has a really nice export tool. So if you spend a lot of time on your LinkedIn, you can actually export it as a PDF and it will pre-format a very nice resume, in my opinion, without a lot of work. So that's something I'll add there in terms of a resume resource as well.
It's actually an excellent idea. Malvika, it's your turn.
I am just so lost listening to all these important pointers. I really hope everyone's making a solid checklist of everything that is being shared. Peter and Michael have put in a lot of heart clearly into putting this together. And just to add to this and to top it up, we have a giveaway for all the students who've joined us in today. So we know that it always helps to have a few samples at hand. So we've put together a few samples for you. The links are there up top on the screen right now. Go ahead and check out those samples, and I'm sure they will help you. You should also check out the chat section right now. In a couple of seconds, our team is going to share the details, the links to these giveaways and a few other relevant links which can be super handy. Right. Okay, I think we're heading towards closure.
Yep. I just, from my point of view, I'll just say thank you very much, Malvika, for inviting us here today. My contact or our contact information is on here on this slide. If you have a camera ready or something, feel free to take a photo of it and reach out. I do want to do just a small shout out to social media. Temple University a couple of years ago initiated a campaign that was called You're Welcome Here, which was really a response to some of the politics that was going on in the US at the time. We are relaunching a new campaign, which is called Why US. I strongly recommend you to find us on Instagram and join us. And if you are looking to study in the US, please do feel free to reach out to either Michael or myself.
Superb. All right. On that note, I just want to head before we head into the last final segment. Want to quickly tell everyone that we have the last session for the evening. That awaits us in the next 10 minutes. It's going to be about GRE and GMAT. We are going to take up all the important details around GRE, GMAT. Few very important announcements that have just come out in the past 1 week from GMAC, which everybody should be aware of. And if it's possible, do stay back, because we will also be solving a few interesting questions that will give you a very clear idea about how you need to prepare for your GRE or GMAT. Okay. Now, while we are heading towards that session, I thought we'll quickly also talk about iSchoolConnect, and then we'll do a rapid fire of questions and answers. So for everyone who's not yet familiar with iSchool Connect, we are a tech company and we assist students through the whole process of studying abroad. So right from the first step where you're looking at understanding which country is right for you, which universities you should apply for, which program best suits your profile, to helping you put together the applications for each of these programs. So be it your essays, your SOPs, putting together your scholarship application, your financial checklist, even helping you with visa, with the whole visa process is something that we take care of. So literally till the pre-departure connect, that whole journey, which is almost 8 months to 1 year, we help you through that entire process. So if you would like to check out iSchool Connect, go ahead and explore us on iSchoolConnect.com. It's absolutely free. Go ahead and sign up. And, we are also available on social media. We love memes and we love informative content. So that's exactly the kind of mix you'll find there, right? And of course, that's our phone number and email address. You will see these details in the chat shortly. Now, while we're at it, let's look at the questions. I have a bunch of important questions that have come in, Peter. One question says, my Coursera certificates as a student pursuing undergraduate abroad, how significant are they for my profile on my resume?
Sorry, this was one more time, Malvika, I missed it.
Right, so the question is, my Coursera certificates, if I'm pursuing an undergraduate and I have Coursera certificates, does it have weightage enough for me to add it to my resume?
Yes, I think this is one of those those certificates, they could be skills, for example. They could also be experience if you develop them, say, from a conference or something like that. So on the resume, this is where, for example, a university might not require certificates, right? Because academically, they don't have the place. But on the resume, you can highlight them because you took them, they were important to you, they generated a skill. And that helps me, for example, to see some of those activities and honors. There's also a mini application process. For example, Temple University undergraduate is on Common App, and there's a place where you can put something like that. If you participated in a conference or if you participated in an honor or an activity, you can list it on there and then we'll see it as part of your application. But absolutely, yes, I would put something on the resume. I think especially when we're younger, right? We don't have all that work experience, etc. So anything that you have to add that help build that character and part is really good for your resume.
Got it. Now, another question that we've received is, what is the weightage the resume holds against all the other documents and aspects of the application? Michael, in case you'd like to take it.
Sure. So I would say the resume, at least from a university admissions perspective, is really supplemental. It gives us a better picture of the student. And I say this simply because to say that nobody, at least at Temple, and Peter, you will likely agree, would be denied from Temple University because of a bad resume. At the same time, if a student is kind of right on the bubble, they're maybe just a little bit shy of what we would be looking for from an academic perspective, a really intentional, thoughtful, impactful resume could absolutely push that student over into getting offered admission. So it's one of these things that can't hurt you, but they can absolutely help you. At any university, whether it's undergraduate or graduate, this should not be shocking to anybody who's going through application processes. Academic information is by far the most important information we look at. There's no debating that previous academic history is the best predictor of future academic potential. So a resume is never going to undo bad grades or bad test scores. But again, if you're very close to being admission, maybe just shy of it, a good resume can put you over.
That's actually exactly what I would add. I think from my own personal background, and maybe many of you are the same in the audience, I was not a straight A student. So I think that first in my mind, so some of the areas where you could make up for that, for example, is by creating a very nice presentable resume about some of those skills or experiences or accomplishments that you have that might be making up. And like Michael said, yes, you cannot make bad grades go away, but you can at least show what sort of path that you're on. And I think in the decision on whether to admit or not, that might be that extra point that you get where the admission becomes more likely. Malvika, you are muted.
Yes. So I was just wanting to know, like, I have another question here. You've got to write an objective to your resume. So any kind of suggestions around what your objective should be?
Well, absolutely, right? I mean, if you're applying for undergraduate, you would make an objective that says, I am looking to join a highly competitive public university. I want to do research or something like that. And Michael, I mean, he can speak for himself, but my guess is that obviously if you're interested in the health related area, I think on the resume, he would want to, to see that directional goal in the objective.
Absolutely, absolutely. So preferably with regards to whichever industry and whichever career choice you're making and what your vision is for yourself within that space would be the best objective. Now, we have another question that we would like to take up. A lot of times students have a few years of gap between their academics or work experience. What is the best way to showcase that?
So I would say it's not something you would want to address on the resume. The resume itself is supposed to be very scannable. It shouldn't be a lot of paragraph text explaining a family situation or explaining a medical condition. This is actually, to Peter's point earlier about a cover letter maybe being a good component of a resume CV. The cover letter is a good place to maybe talk about this gap. I always say that if the resume is the dots of your life, the cover letter is what connects all the dots in your life. So the cover letter can absolutely provide more context to say, hey, I do have this gap in experience. Here's what happened. Here's some additional context. But here's why it made me stronger. Here's why it's not going to impede my ability to succeed. So not only providing context, but also kind of providing reassurance to the person reading that resume that you're still up to the task.
I completely agree on that area, so that's, yes, absolutely. Oh, sorry, I meant to add, on the Common App, for example, there's actually a place where you can enter gap year or gap experience. So if you want to explain that against, just like the resume does, it provides context for, say, a missing year or two, and that will help you explain in your word what you would want to bring across.
Got it, got it. I think a last few questions that we'd like to take. Would there be a difference in a way a resume should be structured from an undergraduate to a graduate? Does it make a difference?
So I would think so, and I'll weigh in here because I've done undergrad and graduate in a couple of different disciplines. An undergraduate resume, especially for a traditional undergraduate student, I'll be honest and say that when I see a resume from a 16, 17, 18-year-old student, I'm not expecting a ton of different experiences, right? I mean, at that point, you just haven't necessarily lived long enough to have a lot of different experiences. At the same time, as somebody who's going into graduate school, master's, doctoral, professional school, I would want to see that this student has been maybe very intentional about these things over the course of either if they're coming right out of undergraduate into graduate, or if they've worked for a little before coming into graduate. I'd like to see I would expect to see more experiences that we can directly tie to graduate study. So for instance, if a student is really interested in PhD programs, I'm going to be highly interested to see if this student has done a lot of collaboration at the undergraduate level with faculty on research projects, on data collection, on those types of things. If a student is truly interested in pursuing a PhD, if a student is really interested in pursuing a graduate degree in finance, I'm going to want to see relevant experience to that in terms of internships, in terms of part-time employment employment in terms of I belong to the student finance club or the investors club at my university. Those are all things that tell me that you've been serious about this for a little while. So I wouldn't say from a format perspective or even a tone or content perspective, there shouldn't be a lot of difference between the undergraduate and graduate resume. But for a graduate resume, I will say I'm looking at it much more closely because they're going to be very specific things that will tell me how serious you are about the graduate degree. And I think this is important to bring up simply because at the undergraduate level, 4-year degree program, we expect you to want to explore a lot of different things. You've got 4 years to kind of taste everything and kind of figure out what your path is. For graduate school, as I always tell students, graduate school is not a place to kind of find yourself. Graduate school is not a place to explore. You've got usually 1 or 2 years. And if you want to explore, there are probably less expensive ways to do that than a master's or doctoral degree. So for a master's and doctoral, we want to see a resume that is very, very honed in on this is my career path. This is exactly what I want to do.
I hope that answers your question, folks. Now, I am actually going to be closing this workshop because we're going to be heading towards the last one. But before we do that, thank you so much, Temple University. Thank you so much, Peter and Michael, for coming down here and sharing every possible genuine suggestion around how students can put together a stellar resume if they're planning to study abroad. Now, big thank you to you, and I hope everyone's learned a lot through this workshop.
Thank you guys.
So much.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Malvika.
Thank you.